Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Super Lunch Bros podcast, episode number 41. I am Brendan.
And I'm Nate.
How's everybody doing? Huh?
Eh?
McGregor looked like crap.
Whew. Well, let's just get right into it then.
So we just had UFC 257 over the weekend, and the main event was Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor. So Conor McGregor is coming off of a big win over Donald Cerrone with the shoulder strikes and stuff, but that was nearly a year ago, if not more than a year ago. I think it was probably in January because it was before the Corona stuff. Anyway, I'll let you. What was your take on the fight first? So obviously, Dustin Poirier
Right.
won by TKO in the second round.
Yes. So, my take, and thinking back on it, I don't think I articulated well why I had concerns about Conor. And while, yeah, he had, handily won the Donald Cerrone fight, it's also not necessarily the Donald Cerrone of 3-4 years ago. And that's not to say that Donald Cerrone isn't dangerous on any given night. But I felt like I hadn't really seen him putting to the test against someone of that caliber since the Khabib fight. So that's kind of why I had my hesitations about whether or not he was going to come in and be the same Conor that he was before.
Okay,
So
I mean,
yeah, and he didn't look bad in the first round. Like
I disagree.
All right,
Go ahead.
so
Go ahead.
he did not look like Conor in the first round.
Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily mean he looked bad.
Mm.
Like it did not feel like a Conor fight in the first round. But I don't necessarily think that he wasn't getting dominated in the first round. It's not like he wasn't getting good punches off. He was having an issue with some of the leg and calf kicks that Poirier was putting out, which was a problem for him later on. But he didn't look like Conor. He just looked like kind of a upper tier skilled lightweight fighter who also just happened to be in the ring with one of the best fighters in the lightweight division on probably one of his best performances he's ever put together.
Okay, so here's my take on it. So I'm gonna take a hard L on this one. I said I had Conor very confident that Conor was gonna find his chin, and in that regard, I was correct.
Yeah.
He caught his chin quite a few times, but the biggest difference for me was the pop on that left hand of Conor. He just didn't. It didn't seem the same. It seemed more lethargic, more plodding than the snappiness that we're used to seeing. And I've seen a lot of pundits and analysts saying that Conor looked great, and for the first round, Poirier is just that much better, and it wasn't a bad fight for Conor.
It's definitely a bad fight for Conor.
So I disagree with that. He didn't this isn't me being a huge Conor fan, hoping he would win. I would rather have seen the Cowboy Conor come out. And I wasn't hoping for 2017 Conor McGregor or 2016 Conor McGregor, the guy who was on a tear, running roughshod through the entire division, calling his shot, and Mystic Mac. That's not what I was looking for. What I was looking for is measured aggression,
explosiveness with precision.
Yeah, and it's just he didn't have any of that. It was so he still had his precision. And he had his timing down. And you can say whatever you want, and I agree that Dustin Poirier fought a very smart fight. With the leg kicks, a very smart fight. And he even attempted the takedown in the first round, got McGregor down, but McGregor fought back to his feet very handily. And then proceeded to go 50-50, and I would argue get the upper hand in the grappling. And Conor himself, after the fight was over in the interview, said he felt way stronger than Poirier, and he should have gone to the grappling more often. And he just, it was too late at that point.
Maybe never heard from Conor before in his life.
Sure, I mean, yeah, but when you feel that in there and you feel like you're in a position where you can dominate your opponent, regardless of what that position is, why not seek that out? So Dustin looked as good as he has. I don't think he looked phenomenal. I think his vision was great. The way he was rolling with the punches, that was fantastic. I will give him that. But as far as his offense goes, he fought a very smart fight and then hobbled McGregor with that low calf kick and then was able to put the finishing touches on the fight in the second round. So I, I still feel like if we have Conor, and Conor even said after the fight, he's got to just get more reps in there and he's got to fight more often. So that's what I'm hoping for after this, as we get more McGregor this year. But congratulations to Dustin Poirier. Like, he did everything he had to do, and on that, it was yesterday. He was the better fighter. It wasn't even. I don't even think it was close. That first round, you can call it whatever you want, but it
didn't feel like you were watching the first round of a Conor McGregor fight. That was kind of like, that was the feeling I had when I was watching it. I was like, all right, this is interesting. Like, I was thrown off by it while I was watching it.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like he was fighting more measured than usual, which is fine.
Yeah.
And, maybe the leg kicks are what caused, not maybe, they are what caused the end of that fight, the ending sequence. It was awkward to watch because it didn't feel, like I said, the punches just didn't have the pop that they normally do. He landed a couple good right hands, and he landed a few of those left hands, but it just wasn't the same. It was like he wasn't following through with them, and they just weren't affecting Poirier the way they should have. There was just a lot of things about the fight when I was watching it that just didn't seem right. Like, everything felt off. So, Conor gets back in there more often. Maybe he'll get back to normal. Or, maybe this is just who Conor is now. Maybe he just fights more measured and slower pace so he can last a full 5 rounds. And if you can go out there and take out his legs early in the fight, maybe you just, everybody gets a win that way now.
I mean, it's hard to say, like, necessarily where Conor's at right now. Because, he wants to get out there and fight. And, we saw a great performance from him against Cerrone. We saw not necessarily what we'd expect from Conor performance last night. Like, where does that necessarily, and maybe we still need to see him fight again to know exactly, like, where he's at right now and measuring up to the rest of the division and all that. But I don't know. I mean, if you wanted to put Conor's next fight together, where would you be leaning towards with it? Because I have an idea, but I want to see.
Probably Gaethje.
So I differ on that one.
I don't want him fighting Oliveira.
Nope.
And I don't.
Tony Ferguson.
Oh.
Because they're both kind of right now in that same kind of sphere of position to where they're not necessarily in contention.
I mean, just with one win, Conor could fight for the title at any time, so it doesn't matter what his rank is.
Exactly. But if I was going to put a fight together for Conor, which I thought is going to be exciting, it's going to have action, it's going to put him to a test, and it's going to draw views, I'm putting him with Tony Ferguson.
I mean, I don't argue that that's a good fight. I don't think that's the best move for Conor right now. And then, actually, now that I think about it, like, just when I said Justin Gaethje, I didn't even think, like, if leg kicks are going to be that big of a problem, you don't want to be fighting Gaethje.
Nope.
Yeah, because I'm trying not to leave Gaethje out here because everybody's, like, there's this there's this dedicated hype train on Oliveira, which I'm not trying to say he's not deserving of a title shot. He is. There's many fighters who deserve a title shot. Obviously, Poirier deserves a title shot. It's just Oliveira has, like I said, he had one win against a premium ranked opponent, right, in Tony Ferguson. That's his latest win, and that was a fantastic fight for him. There's nothing, you can't take anything away from that. But the guy he beat before that was Kevin Lee, who is up and down anyway and loses when he shouldn't and wins when he can't. Like, sometimes, like, he's got all the skill in the world, just can't put it together kind of fighter. And then before that, it was unranked opponents, and that, like, people are calling, they're like, oh, well, he's on an 8-fight win streak. Are we just going to forget about Oliveira? Like, nobody's forgetting about him. It's just he hasn't had to fight the best of the best for the last 5 years and hold off the best of the division like Tony Ferguson has, right? Or like Dustin Poirier has, or even now Justin Gaethje has, or before them Eddie Alvarez. We're talking about guys who have done nothing but fight top tier talent.
Just absolute dominating fighters.
Over and over again, like back to back, like never getting an easy fight, never getting an easy out. And then these guys are putting together wins or going 50-50 with these guys, like, splitting wins and losses or something like that. In Poirier's case, like he really only lost to the champ, like in Khabib.
Yeah.
So there's no argument that Oliveira should get a title shot or shouldn't get a title shot. It's just that should he get it over someone else right now? I don't think so. And like maybe he fights Dan Hooker next, right? Who's coming off a loss out here.
I got a better idea though than that. Maybe not necessarily better, but I know the UFC is not keen on putting together tournaments. But I think you have the prime ingredients right now for a lightweight tournament.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but they already have a title fight that they need to line up.
But do they?
Yes, they do. Dana White said it already. I mean, we can get to it right now, but like, I just want to talk. I just want to say like one more thing about the fight. So, from what I saw from Poirier, not what I saw from Poirier. From what I saw from McGregor, and then the back and forth between Poirier before the fight, during the fight, and afterwards, I really enjoy this. Poirier is a stand-up guy. He's got the Good Fight Foundation. Conor McGregor, donating to it and all that stuff. Khabib has donated to it. They've been very respectful. It's been very refreshing. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
It's been refreshing to watch this happen, especially with, the mess that the McGregor Khabib fight was. So this fight felt good. I don't feel like, it's not just bad blood. It's just there's things in MMA when you have hype trains with negative attitudes, or people who don't want to play ball with the UFC for good reasons or bad reasons. I'm not saying, like, here's a good example. Tyron Woodley. I'm like, I don't want to just crap on him the entire time, but famously and very publicly, disagreeing with the UFC, not getting along with Dana White, and then when he does get the title, the first he has some less than spectacular victories and a tie, and then he gets his title taken away from him, and then like there's basically no way he's getting it back, right? And it just feels gross in that scenario.
When things get messy outside the ring, it spills over into the ring. Like it hurts the product.
Yeah, for me it does. I know for a lot of people, like, they don't care because they treat it like, high theater. It's like, oh, these people are just, they're playing the game and talking crap, and that's part of it, and I understand that. But you can do that while still maintaining like a monicum of respect for your opponent. And you can say whatever you want about Conor. Like, before the fights, he was always, hyping it up, talking crap, naysaying his opponents, naysaying everybody. Jeremy Stevens got a brunt of that, and he wasn't even fighting him. Who the fuck is that guy, right? So we've seen all that, but every single time afterwards, he's been very respectful of his opponents, like in wins and losses. He talks, like, even when he beat Aldo, he's like, he was a great champion, right? He's like, it's just my time. Before that fight, it was very, it was kind of brutal watching that stuff. The lead up to the first time, and then they didn't fight, and then the second lead up, is very disrespectful. But then afterwards, it was nothing but respect. So it's nice to see that on the front end as well. And I appreciate this because I think it hurts your stock less when you lose if you're very respectful beforehand.
I wholeheartedly agree. Plus, it's kind of hard to be disrespectful to Dustin Poirier because he's just like, he's not, we're talking like Wonder Boy level tier of like
nice,
overt, like impossibly nice, but like he is a stand-up of a guy as you're going to get inside the UFC. So it's like, yeah, it's
I love you and Jesus loves you, and we're going to go in there and fight. May the best man win. And then afterwards we're going to hug it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, I love Wonder Boy.
Yeah. I thought it was a great fight. I still stand by my pretty much like 51-49 assessment.
Yeah. I mean,
like, I don't necessarily think this proves anything one way or another. I just think Dustin happened to be able to put it together the way he needed to on the given night.
I mean,
And Connor,
I don't go back on my prediction. Wasn't the Connor I was expecting, right?
Yeah.
I thought he was going to find his chin within the first 2 rounds. He did, and it just didn't land as hard as it normally does. And who knows? Maybe I'm just totally wrong and off here, and I'm just not seeing the bigger picture, or I'm just not seeing reality. But
I don't think we're going to know that for a couple more Connor fights.
That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of lightweights and matchups going forward in the title, which this should have been a title fight because Khabib is retired, regardless. The co-main event, Dan Hooker getting no favors and Michael Chandler also getting no favors, taking on Dan Hooker as his first UFC opponent. Michael Chandler comes out and just does what Michael Chandler does. Just knocks Dan Hooker clean out. I mean, it wasn't clean. I guess it was a TKO, but in the first round, he was plodding forward, moving in, getting his range. Hooker was always on the back foot, keeping good distance, doing leg kicks. I thought he fought a decent fight, and Chandler caught him with a big left hand. And
followed through very well.
Put his ass right on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for those of you guys who aren't familiar, Michael Chandler was a big deal in Bellator, obviously the champion for a very long time, beat one of the Pitbull brothers and then lost to the other one. So that being said, just a quick aside here, Bellator has legit fighters. For those of you guys who still don't think that, the Pitbull brothers could definitely compete in the UFC and compete for a title and maybe even win a title in the UFC. So the Bellator has the best talent, is on par with the best talent in the UFC at the upper echelon of each division. It's the depth that Bellator doesn't have. So,
absolutely.
With Chandler knocking out Hooker, who was ranked, where do you think we go from here?
So this is where we get into my lightweight. I know. I want there basically just to be a lightweight tournament with Michael Chandler thrown in there, but obviously, we're probably not going to get that. If I had to set another matchup up for him, I'm probably going Justin and Chandler.
Okay.
Either Justin and Chandler or Oliveira and Chandler.
Dana White called for it because they asked for it. They asked for hey, are these two guys fighting for the title next? And Dana said yes. So, Dana's word doesn't mean everything because, as we know,
I did not see that he declared who.
Yeah, they asked him in the post-fight press conference, basically hey, who's up next for the title? Is it these two guys who won? It seems like the logical next step, and Dana White was like, yes. Okay. So that being said, let's say Michael Chandler fights Dustin Poirier for the title. Okay, so that's next. So we figure they both fought. It works well for timing because they fought at the same card. So, you figure you make this fight for 3-4 months from now, put it on a big card, maybe even 5 months from now, put it on a June or July card, the UFC, what is that called? The Fight Village. I forget what it's called. They have that big event around the 4th of July every year.
Oh yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah, so that's when they had UFC 200. I think that's when they had UFC 100. But they stack those cards as well as around Christmas and that kind of stuff. So, let's say they fight 3, 4, 5 months from now, right? So those two guys are taken off the table, and even if they weren't fighting, they're off the table for at least 3 months because they're not getting scheduled for another fight.
I don't mind them for the title fight. I think that's a fair throw-in.
So what we have left in the lightweight division, we covered this last week, but we have Justin Gaethje at rank number 1. I think that might change after this weekend. I think Dustin might move to the number 1.
I think so too.
Which would make sense. There's nothing wrong. Those two switching places means nothing. Yeah. Justin could fight Charles Oliveira. That's a good fight.
That's where my money's on. Because say you pit Justin against Connor. Now you've got Tony and Oliveira who have to fight somebody. I guess you could do Oliveira and Hooker, but that kind of.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense for Oliveira coming off a win, and Hooker is already ranked below him and coming off a loss.
Because I feel like if you set up Justin and Oliveira and then Connor and Tony,
Yeah, see, I was going to say Ferguson versus Hooker makes sense now. But you know what else makes sense? Looking at the rankings, because remember, Michael Chandler's hopping in there. So Michael
Yep.
Chandler's either, my guess is, because rankings are a total crapshoot, but let's say he gets dropped in and takes Dan Hooker's spot, which is a possibility, but it could also be that somebody else moves up, like Rafael dos Anjos. So,
Oh, I keep forgetting about Rafael back in
right,
lightweight.
right.
Whew.
So Rafael doesn't have the win history at lightweight, the recent win history at lightweight, but he does have he's a former title holder. He's has a very good record when it comes to being at lightweight. So, and he has history with Conor McGregor. They were supposed to fight
That's right.
years ago when he was supposed to fight him for the title. So, I mean, they could set that fight up. I know it doesn't make much sense for McGregor. Ferguson obviously has that huge history with him as well, so that could be good. You could fight, actually, now that I'm saying it, so let's do Conor versus Ferguson. Makes sense. Hooker versus Dos Anjos.
That could make sense. Now that you brought Dos Anjos up, I want him to fight Oliveira.
I mean, I would watch that fight too. That's a good fight.
I think that's a good matchup for both of them to a certain extent in terms of their strengths. You're either going to see really interesting ground game battle between both of them or, decent stand-up. I think I would rather see that than see Dos Anjos fight Conor.
Yeah, I think I would rather see everybody fight Conor because that's an interesting matchup no matter who's fighting him. So I think that's fun.
Maybe Justin versus Hooker. That would be.
I'm down for that too, but I don't want Hooker's coming off of 2 losses. I don't think that's a good move for Gagey right now. So let's see what shakes out in the next couple months as far as scheduling goes, because the lightweight division is still stacked as always.
And there are a ton of interesting matchups.
Nothing but talent. Okay. So we had some women flyweights. Calderwood fought Jessica Ai. Calderwood called out because she was supposed to fight Valentina, but there were some injuries that happened, so that fight fell through. But she beat Jessica Ai via decision. I think she gets smoked by Valentina, but who's to say she didn't earn a title shot?
I mean, some of those divisions, it's pretty much just however the wind blows. So
yeah, because we had Jessica Ai at 6, who got knocked out by Shevchenko. We have Calvillo. I don't think she fought her yet. We have Jennifer Maia, who just lost the title fight. Lauren Murphy could fight her. Caitlin Chukagian lost, and Jessica Andrade is probably going to get the next title shot.
That's right. We talked about that too.
Let's see, middleweight, we had Andrew Sanchez. That was an okay fight. He just faded and by the 3rd round, Muradov just put him away. Here's one. So Marina Rodriguez versus Amanda Ribas, or Rodriguez. I don't think she's Brazilian. So Amanda Ribas is like a highly touted prospect and very good talent, and she just got clocked by Rodriguez. Like, Rodriguez hits hard. So as far as strawweights go, like, it's always interesting to see hard hitters at 115 because, I mean, that's not very common. Yeah, men or women's divisions. Obviously, there's no men's strawweight, but in the UFC. But there's, she's ranked number 8, and there's a lot of good matchups for her up there, being Michelle Waterson, Claudia, Nina Ansaroff, Carla, Joanna, and Rose, all those things. So we need to see Weili Zhang fight again. So I don't think she gets a title shot after that, but there's just this women's strawweight is also very stacked and it's interesting. There's a lot of parity in there, which is nice, and that makes for interesting fights and matchups. So that division is on par with any division in the UFC as far as like excitement of fights, talent in the division, and depth. I think that's really exciting going forward for them.
Could not agree more.
Prelims. So we had Armin Saryukian just beating the crap out of Frevola for 3 rounds. Brad Tavares looked great. Okay, so I kind of want to talk about this one before we get to the bantamweight division because that's a crap show too. So Brad Tavares, like I want to look up his fight history because at middleweight, it's not like he hasn't had opportunities. It's just he. How do I say this without being disrespectful? He's a very talented fighter, but the middleweight division isn't exactly stacked, and he can't put a lot of wins together. So it seems like every time he gets up against like the upper echelon, he just can't get it done. So going far back, back to like 2014, I think it's important because like he had 5 wins in a row, and then his win against Lorenz Larkin, he was 12-1. Then he lost a decision to Yoel Romero. Okay, he went 3 full rounds with Yoel. Then he got knocked out by Tim Bosch. See, that's what I'm saying. He beat Nate Marquardt, but that's, in 2015, Nate Marquardt wasn't himself. Then he gets knocked out by Robert Whitaker, who is the champ. So there we go. Charles Michaelis, Elias Theodoro, he beat Talis Leites, Christoph Jotko. Like, those are decent wins. Then he loses a decision to Adesanya. He went 5 full rounds with Adesanya. Now, he wasn't ever really in the fight, but he didn't get finished. Then he loses to Edmund Shabazian. Edmund Shabazian is the one who fights out of Edmund Tarvarian's camp, Ronda Rousey's former camp. And he was he's a prospect coming up, and then he just got smoked in his last fight. And then he gets his win against Shoeface Antonio Carlos Jr. So Brad Tavares now is he even ranked? Yeah, he's ranked number 4. He was ranked number 14 before the weekend, so I fully expect for him to move up at least one against Omari Akhmedov, who won last weekend or on Wednesday. So Brad Tavares, like, he's got cardio. He can hit hard. Like, he showed off excellent wrestling defense. It's just I don't feel like he has a skill that's puts him far ahead of anybody in that division. So when he goes up against someone who has, a very specialized skill set, he just can't get it done. And there's like I think he's a fun brawler and very good, and there's lots of fun fights for him.
Do you know what I think is a fun fight for him?
Why?
Maybe well, yeah, that was exactly the words that were going to come out of my mouth. I was like, if I had to pick anyone on the list above him, which I think is a good test to figure out whether he is going to break into the top 10 or not.
Yeah.
Chris Weidman.
Yeah, Chris Weidman's looking to get back on the horse, so let's go. That's a good fight. I think he could fight Akhmedov because they, both fought around the same time. They're at the same ranking. That's fine. He lost to Edmund already. Kevin Holland's a tough test. I think Kevin Holland's a really crafty guy. Uriah, Kelvin, Derek, Jack, Hermanson. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing him fight. Let's get him back in there and see him fight Weidman.
Yeah,
because that's a good test for Weidman too, to see if he can still keep up with someone who's top 10 talent in the middleweight division.
Yep.
Okay, so women's bantamweight, we had a fight of consequence. Why? Because women's bantamweight is super thin. So we had Juliana Pena defeating Sarah McMahon via submission in the 3rd round. She had just like a rear naked choke. She had half in, finished her almost with one arm. I think she had the other arm involved, but it wasn't super tight. And it doesn't matter. So Pena was supposed to be one of those. She was one of the ones who's gonna dethrone Amanda Nunes a few years ago, and she lost a couple fights. Losing to. We went over this last week, but her latest loss was getting submitted by Jermaine Durandamy. Not a good look. So she called out. She called for Amanda Nunes, and you get what you ask for a lot. I think that they could make this happen because let's see, Jermaine Durandamy is ranked number 1, and I don't see her getting a rematch right now. Holly Holm, don't see her getting a rematch right now, although she's probably the biggest name. Aspen Ladd, probably not getting. Did they fight already? No, I don't remember.
I'd probably do Holly Holm Aspen. If you're
Yeah,
gonna get a Holly Holm rematch, I'd probably do that.
Yeah, so you could throw her at Nunes, see if her grappling can keep up with Amanda Nunes. Because I mean that's the test, right? Is
Yep.
Nunes is a very well-rounded fighter, so someone like Durandamy clearly has the advantage on the feet, and once Amanda Nunes kind of gasses her arms out, which despite what everybody keeps saying, like she still does, she still has cardio problems. It's just they usually don't show up because she's so far ahead of everybody. She can take her time.
Yeah.
But if she seeks that finish and starts swinging for the fences, she still gasses. And Durandamy had the advantage on the feet, clearly, in their contest. It just so happened that, Durandamy has horrible takedown defense, and Amanda Nunes is really good at getting you to the ground. So she was able to ride out a win on top. So, and vice versa, you get someone who's really good on the ground. God, who fought her a while ago? Now I don't even remember. She's not even ranked anymore. But like if she goes against a good grappler, she can just outstrike him on the feet.
Yep.
So if you threw someone like Sarah McMahon at her, she's just going to get picked apart on the feet. So it's just one of those things where, and she knocked out Holly Holm too with a head kick.
I know.
So
it's amazing she doesn't. I feel like Amanda Nunes is even like she doesn't get the credit she deserves for how long she's held the belt, stay in the game, even as thin as that division has gotten since she's.
I think it's always been thin.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always been thin. You've had one good champion for an extended period of time, and then a little bit of turnover, and then another good champion rises to the top, and then just dominates the division again. It's very similar to, women's flyweight, which is relatively new, but we only have had one real champion there. I think that whoever was the first champ, I forget her name. Oh, crud. But she's not like she didn't even fight her. Like she just had to give up the title. So there's just there's a good chance that Nunes keeps the title and retires not undefeated, but without losing her title. Yeah. And then we go back to parity for a little bit until we get another killer in there, which could be a while because I don't see anybody in this division right now has the skills to really put everybody else away. So I think her leaving would kind of create more excitement in the division, even if it's not necessarily the best move for the division as far as like the talent pool and, name recognition goes.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Light heavyweight, Khalil Roundtree, he lost a Marcin Prachnio decision. I don't know. He gassed out pretty early on. Halfway through the second round, he just kind of wasn't putting his stuff together, and he was landing big shots, and I have no idea. It was very weird. Nick Lentz is probably, I think he retired after this fight, got poked in the eye a couple times, punched in the eye, and he already lost 40% of his vision before this, so I don't think I think that's a good retirement for him. Doesn't need to be fighting anymore.
I wholeheartedly agree.
And there's nothing much left on there. All right. My takeaway from this weekend. I like the crowds back. I know there's been even crowds the last couple.
Even having just the partial crowds in there definitely makes a difference.
I do like the crowds back. There's a lot of things I didn't miss, and we didn't have those, like idiots screaming and booing. I don't like that. But the excitement of hearing people, when a fighter makes a push, hearing people like the crowd rise up and pick up the volume and the excitement, I think that's pretty fun. Lightweight is still, it's still the best division in the UFC, and I think Conor McGregor, despite not fighting for a year, I don't think he deserved to keep that 4 next to his name, but I mean, him being ranked doesn't bother me as much
No.
after this weekend, especially after what he said, wanting to get back in there instead of bouncing out to have another boxing match.
Yeah, I think his heart's in the right place for probably what makes him happy, what's healthy for him. I mean, he doesn't need to fight another day in his life, money-wise, but I think he just legitimately enjoyed it and missed it and wants to be a part of the action.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just wasn't as excited for this fight as I guess I should have been. Like, there wasn't as much hype around this contest as you would expect for a Conor McGregor fight. It didn't fly under the radar. It's still Conor. It's just the world wasn't abuzz for this one.
I don't think there was a ton of hype behind Poirier. Like, I think he wasn't necessarily the dance partner that people were looking for Conor, I think. He came out there and proved himself, but Poirier isn't necessarily a draw in the UFC, and he isn't like a widely known. Like, most people outside the UFC don't know of Poirier outside the surface level fact of Conor had already beat him previously in his career. I think that's what most people knew about Poirier going into this fight, who weren't UFC fans.
That could be. That makes sense. All right.
And a lot of what draws people to Conor fights are casual fans, and like that's kind of what drums up a lot of the hype around him. And maybe not necessarily casual, but just like specific Conor fans. So,
yeah, I mean, and we got a fun new addition to the UFC lightweight division. And for anybody who's talking crap or not liking the fact that Chandler just immediately gets dropped into the top 10 as far as challenges go, and a month ago or 2 months ago, being on deck to fight for the title, or I didn't have a problem with it then, and I don't have a problem with it now.
I actually kind of appreciate the UFC showing that level of respect to Bellator.
Yeah, they did the same thing for Alvarez. Remember his first UFC fight was against Cowboy Cerrone when Cerrone was, in the top 5 of the lightweight division.
Yeah, like I think it's nice that UFC respects the level of talent of the fighters there and acknowledge it through what they present.
Yeah. Yes. I like the fact that, here's one part that I guess I kind of understand from a marketing perspective, but when they called out when they're showing the preview right before the fight and the build up, obviously, but I don't want to watch the embedded stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously they have a lot of film on Dan Hooker. So they're showing his fights in the UFC and his finishes and like how dynamic he is and blah, blah, blah. And then they cut to Chandler and it's just him training because they refuse to use film from Bellator because I guarantee you they could have given Bellator like a couple $1,000. I don't know how many thousand, but a couple $1,000 and got all the film they needed on him.
But they just didn't want the logo. They
could blur out the logo. You're telling me like these guys don't know how to use like After?
I'm sure they could.
Adobe Premiere. Of course they do.
I wonder if there was a single person in the room with Dana that told him that like, hey, maybe we should just suck it up and show the footage.
Well, it makes for a better build up, especially like when you're talking this guy up, and they never mention Bellator. They talk about his former opponents, and they'll talk about Eddie Alvarez being in the division, even
or
though he doesn't fight
coming
for them
from
anymore.
An outside organization.
Yeah,
that's how they like.
He was a champion in other organizations, like
other organizations.
Okay, yeah, we know what organization you're talking about. Like it's some secret that it doesn't exist.
It's like somehow if they say Bellator, they'll just lose fans. They're just like, if we tell them there's something else out there, they might watch it instead of us.
Yeah,
it's such a feast or famine mentality.
It's not a zero-sum game. Like the guy can watch. You can watch 2 organizations. It's not that hard. It's like watching college basketball and the NBA. You can watch both or neither or one of them. Like you don't have to watch just one. And it's not like they don't mention the other one,
There are
out
probably
of fear of
very
losing
few
fans.
Bellator fans purely watching Bellator and not watching the UFC.
Exactly.
Like that, the percentage of people on this earth that are pure Bellator fans that don't watch the UFC are like you could probably fit them in a high school gymnasium.
Like it's almost like they think it waters down their product a little bit, saying that like they're even on the level of the UFC. Like if we mention Bellator in the same sentence as our fighters, then all of a sudden, people are going to think that they have as good of fighters. Like we already know they do because the people from the UFC who have gone to Bellator haven't universally been successful, and vice versa. Like Bellator has
Yeah.
had people become champs in the UFC. You know, like it's just the fact that you're trying to hide
That
something
there's
that
they're trying
MMA
to
fans
hide that there
already
are
know.
good fighters in other organizations.
But it's like the people watching MMA, like let's say you're not even a casual fan. Like let's say you just watch Conor McGregor fights, right? Or Ronda Rousey or
They
Brock
don't want
Lesnar.
people to realize they can watch good fights without paying for them through
But
pay-per-view.
The UFC puts on like 50 cards a year now.
I
And
know.
most of
That's
them are free. They only have like 12 pay-per-views, if that.
I feel like it's just still a holdover mentality from their previous business models and
I
philosophy,
guess.
management style. Like,
I mean, there's only been one organization that rivaled the UFC in popularity and, I guess, never in universal, uh, not appreciation or appeal. What's the word I want to use? You know how
I'm
like,
saying like talent pool.
yeah, I think they're still, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm like Kleenex. We call it Kleenex, but it's
Yeah.
facial tissue, or post-it note. Well, it's a sticky note, right? The brand is like you use that brand name to name the other items, or for some people in the United States, they say Coke for all types of pop,
Yeah.
right? So people who like I have heard people say like, oh, like he fights UFC, like not MMA. Like UFC is synonymous with like it's a synonym for MMA. Like people just say, oh, they fight UFC, or oh, they do UFC.
Yeah.
But no one's ever said they do Pride. Like no one said that, right? Even though Pride was as popular at the peak, because the UFC had lost a lot of not I don't know if they had a ton of fans at that time anyway, but there was a lot of exciting things in Pride happening, especially with the heavyweight tournaments they put on and all the fights and just the craziness, this the whole spectacle that they did with 40,000, 50,000 fans in Saitama Arena, that kind of stuff. It's like that's the last organization that I can think of through all the UFC's purchases, right? They purchased Pride, they purchased Strikeforce, they purchased WEC, all these things. And I think the only one that ever rivaled the UFC was Pride. And that was shown in the fact that they would send their fighters. They sent Chuck Liddell to compete in the Pride light heavyweight tournament, or actually that was their middleweight tournament because I don't think they had a light heavyweight. But anyway, the point is, I don't understand what the UFC is afraid of. I don't think they're going to lose fans or that people are going to find another product they prefer to the UFC. I don't think that's the case. I still think their production value, or their production quality, I think the value of being a UFC Fight Pass, subscriber far outweighs anything anybody else can put out right now. I don't think anybody's even
100%.
close. And I've said it before. I think one of the simplest things that the UFC does better than anybody else is lighting. The way they light the octagon makes it very watchable.
Production value. I mean, just in general is.
Yeah. Well, I'm not even talking about like the camera setup and like the embedded things where they're filming their fighters or any of that stuff. I just mean while the fight's going on, I never once think like, I wish the lighting was better, or if only they had a better camera angle. Never once in my mind do I think that. Right? When I'm watching Bellator, sometimes I still like, why is that part of the octagon, or that part of that
Why is it so
cage,
dark there?
why is it dark? Like,
Yeah.
why isn't that lit up right? Like, why do these guys look so shiny? Like, different things like that, right? And I've watched ONE FC, and they still, everything, it just doesn't feel exactly the same. Pride had very good lighting as well, And like watching Pride fights, I never once was like, man, why is it so weird or dark or anything like that. So I don't understand it. I mean, I'm not the smartest businessman, I guess. Like maybe obviously they know better than I do, but I don't think it hurts their brand. I hate that word.
I don't think that there are rival competitions, like that they have rivals. Like,
well, they don't have a rival.
I know, but it's like, but they perceive it as a rival. Like, and
for market share.
I know it's ridiculous, but they're just the way they treat it. They treat it like if we give it any life, it's somehow going to destroy us. Like,
there's no other organization that even does pay-per-view events anymore.
I know, and that's why it's kind of ridiculous to me. It's like, all right, it's there. You can talk about it. It's not.
The UFC is on ESPN. They won. Mean, it's like you like guys did it.
It's like almost NFL to CFL. Like it's or NFL.
That's a different game.
I know.
Like Canadian football still has the uprights at the front of the end zone, and there's only 3 downs, and it's 15 yards.
Yeah, but like its existence doesn't take away from the NFL.
No, if you like the CFL, you like the CFL. You can go watch it. Bless you.
Yeah.
Or
like XFL or whatever.
So the XFL is probably a better allegory, and I think the NFL lending credence to the XFL is okay. So, all right, let's take a step back here. Maybe the UFC doesn't want to elevate the profile of Bellator because they're afraid that they will become, a competitor for market share. But I challenge that because I think if MMA grows in general, obviously the UFC is still going to have the largest market share unless something crazy drastic happens. Okay. I mean, they sold the organization for $4.2 billion.
The biggest threat to the UFC out of elevating Bellator is how they compensate fighters.
But that's in the court case, and people know about that already.
I know, but and I know it's a very blatant thing, but it is, I think, perpetually going to be the issue that keeps coming back to bite the UFC because they don't want to deal with it. And I think their biggest issue, because I think they had no problem, what is it? The one that they shipped Sage Northcutt out to. Is it?
One,
yeah. I think they had no problem because they lent credence to that organization by directly doing trade and sending fighters over there. I don't think they
brought Ben Askren from there.
Yeah, I don't think they necessarily see one as a competitor that brings out those issues. Bellator directly brings out the issues of fighter compensation to the UFC. Like that's kind of the number one thing that gets talked about when you start comparing them. And that's not to say Bellator is perfect at compensating fighters, but that tends to be the talking point that gets brought to light whenever Bellator comes into the conversation. So, and I think the UFC absolutely has a policy of not wanting to make that a public issue as much as possible.
So we know it because of the court cases and public documents, or documents that were made public now, that compensation for most other organizations like Strikeforce, WEC, Bellator, obviously Scott Coker ran Strikeforce and now Bellator. He also briefly worked for the UFC. But the point is, like, the compensation is the fighters make 30% or 30 to 40% of the organization's. I don't know if it's net profit, but I think it is.
Yeah.
So they make 30 to 40%, right? I think Bellator is at like 35 or 38 or something like that. Strikeforce was right around there. WEC, same thing. And then we know that the UFC compensates at 18%. Okay. So as far as individual fighter pay and compensation, from the outside looking in and not digging into the documents myself, because individual pay has been released, but there's obviously additional payments and things that aren't released, and they're private pay, like it's private information. It's not even necessarily backdoor deals. There's part of things that like pay-per-view money and that kind of stuff that are worked into your contract. So I think at the high end, the very tippy top of the UFC, you have an opportunity to make more money than you could possibly make in Bellator, and it's not even close, right? I think the highest compensated fighters in the UFC, John Jones, Daniel Cormier, Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey, guys who are George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, right? If you notice if you notice the through line there, they're all champions who had a long reign or a long history of winning fights.
Proven pay-per-view draw is kind of it's probably the best metric for it.
That's another one. So like if you look at them and their compensation versus, the best in Bellator, I firmly believe that the UFC pays better. But that being said, the fact that the UFC no longer allows you to get outside sponsors and you can't have, well, you can, but you can't wear them on your shorts anymore with the Reebok deal, and you can't put up your banner anymore. Like all of those things, right? For your middling fighter, I think Bellator provides a very lucrative opportunity, especially because you don't have to have a pristine record to not only exist in that organization, but to excel in Bellator. Your record means less.
There's a double-edged sword to it, though, because ultimately what you lose from the UFC when you once had the capability of getting outside sponsorship was the publicity, was the name like yes, you can still
going under.
I know, but you can still get name recognition in Bellator, but like you have more freedom of ability to make outside income, but that's going to be hampered by your ability to actually draw sponsorships and capitalize on sponsorships when you're not out there on the forefront on a pay-per-view pulling so many views. Like it hurts your negotiating power when you try to approach compensation from sponsorships, which I think was part of what made that a powerful tool in the UFC, because it has such wide viewership, because it has the fame, because it's, and I looked it up so I could figure out what that word was, proprietary eponym.
Okay.
That's the,
what's that second word?
Eponym.
Oh.
EPONYM. Okay. Yeah. Proprietary eponym is like Kleenex thing. It's a hard thing to say. EpiPen.
EpiPen. Proprietary EpiPen.
Speaking of proprietary
EpiPen.
So like taking that aspect of compensation away from the UFC was shitty on just that double level. Because not only do you have to leave the organization to do it, but by leaving the organization to do it, you're going to still get compensated less. So it kind of double fucked fighters, the way that they set that up.
Yeah, but okay, so let's look at the Reebok deal, which we know we can see the numbers for, where 3 fights in the UFC, they're like 10 grand per fight, right? Which is pennies. Okay, yes. 10 grand. So for those of you guys who don't understand, fighters,
if you fight twice a year, you can make more at McDonald's in some states.
That's part of it, but the other thing is, like, these fighters, right? If they want to make a career out of it, and I don't want to get into the the ethical or philosophical discussion of like, well, you should have a real job. Like, I don't care about any of that crap. They're professional athletes and they do what they do, right?
They're professional athletes in an organization where we know the compensation numbers of other organizations and what they're getting in comparison. And they're getting specifically targeted in a way to where they're not able to make outside money, even though they're independent contractors. That's the issue at hand.
Yeah. And to the point of like the philosophical argument of whether or not they should be making money to be a professional athlete, I just don't want to have that. I'd rather have the discussion of like the fair compensation for what they're providing to the organization itself, because obviously the organization is a business that is profiting off of these fighters, and the fighters also profit when the business does well. It's just that if you look at someone who's making 10 grand per fight, right, or 5 and 5, which means you only get half if you win, so you only get 5 grand per fight, right? That's a normal contract for the UFC. Your first 3 fights are 5 and 5, or maybe your more popular 15-15, something like that. So these guys let's say they fight. Let's say you fight 3 times a year, which is normal for a prospect. Okay. Let's say you win all 3 fights. So that's $30,000 that you have made as a professional athlete. So that means you have $30,000 not only to pay for, housing, clothing, basic,
Health insurance, which
well,
is
no, the
because
UFC provides health insurance
for year round or just for fight related injuries.
both. Only when you're in a fight camp. When a fight is
See.
scheduled, right?
So
That's
you
why
still
they
need
schedule a fight.
exactly, but I'd be curious to see how that actually covers.
I have heard a little bit of complaining from it, but it's more of fighters who aren't in the organization anymore. I haven't heard a lot of complaining about the coverage during. It's just that, like, sometimes fighters who have like a messed up nose will schedule a fight just so they can get their nose fixed.
Yeah.
So with the lay of the land kind of set out there.
Family?
Oh, I don't know. Probably not.
And that's where, all right, so now
yeah,
family coverage for healthcare.
So in this with this hypothetical fighter, not necessarily a highly touted prospect, just a normal journeyman fighter who's made his way to the UFC, coming in obviously unranked, and he wins his first 3 fights in the UFC, finishes out his first UFC contract. In that position, okay, this is the best case scenario, by the way. He now made $30,000 for the year, and let's forego any bonuses, right? Because those are
if you're on a prelim, few and far between.
Well, it's very competitive as well.
Yeah.
If you're fighting 3 times a year, that means, or if you're on a fight night, right? There's 10 fights, 12 fights, so that means there's might be 3 bonuses. So it's like 30% chance that you'll get, and that's not true because one of those bonuses is fight of the night, so both fighters get $50K, but the other bonuses are like submission, knockout, performance. Those are all individual bonuses. So there's 24 fighters, and only 4 of them are going to get a bonus, or 3 of them are going to get a bonus.
And you're also competing against the top tier fighters on that card,
right? Who have all the eyes on.
Yeah. So.
Right. So let's forego any bonuses, and let's give them just like the base pay. So they made $30K in a year. So they have to take care of their basic, I wouldn't say human needs, let's say American human needs, right? So housing here is more expensive than certain places in the world. Food is more expensive, blah, blah, healthcare, blah, 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 all that stuff. So not only do they have to take care of that with that $30,000, they also have to take care of their camp. Like these fighters have to pay for training, which is not cheap. Like if you just went to
this ain't a gym membership to LA Fitness.
No, and in fact, a lot of these fighters, they start out, at a bigger camp, just paying like the not recreational fee, but they're paying, $100 a month, and they don't get a lot of attention. So they're going in on their wherewithal, their willingness to train outside of that gym, put in the extra effort and all that stuff, which I commend them for. But as far as compensation goes, now we're looking at someone who probably is paying for 3 fight camps, and if they're paying the camp for that, let's say it's $1,000 per camp, right? 3 months. That's not outrageous. $300 a month for a full camp. That's pretty conservative, right? $333, whatever. So $3,000 is gone, right? So it's $27,000 plus taxes. So because they make over 25,000, so it is taxed.
Yep.
So
and they're independent contractors, so they're having to.
They don't have a W-2.
Nope.
So they have to they have all that stuff, and they get taxed more heavily too because they're professional athletes, and they get taxed in every state that they compete in. I think similar to the NFL.
So rule of thumb for independent contracting is they're just automatically going to put aside 30% if they're
that's okay.
Listening to someone intelligent.
Right. So they
don't fuck themselves on taxes.
So that's $13,000 gone. So we're left with $17,000 for a professional athlete to pay for their food, right? This is a professional athlete. Let's say you're a heavyweight fighter and really good, right? And I bring up heavyweight because you're bigger, you have more mass, you need to eat more food to maintain that mass. That's just kind of how it works, So let's say you're a heavyweight fighter and conservatively you're spending $100 a month on food, right? That's let's just say it's another grand a year if you eat cheap, right? So now we're left with 16 grand to pay for everything else. As a professional athlete, how do you expect those guys to perform at their peak if they can't afford like even basic housing?
How do you expect to attract the best athletes in the country to your athletic organization if that's your compensation package?
Exactly. And that's where I think Bellator does a really good job about getting fighters in earlier, being able to develop them. And I think having like a sponsorship deal, being able to wear, well, because the UFC is moving to Venom, I believe. The new sponsorship is with Venom apparel. So, but like with Bellator, you can get a sponsor. You can get Venom to sponsor you. You can get, freaking Coca-Cola to sponsor you. You can get Monster to sponsor you individually. Bud Light, any sort of the beverage company, even local companies that want to get their name out there. You remember like Dynamic Fastener, what wasn't one of them? That's a bigger company. I still don't know what they do and never looked it up. But there's just a lot of times where, mentioning another organization, because think about it this way: if I elevate Bellator's profile, there's more people might go into Bellator because they have better compensation packages for like up and coming fighters, and they can fight at a more casual pace while still maintaining a normal lifestyle. And then you use it as like almost like a farm league, because you can freaking scavenge people from Bellator. It's not that hard. Maybe the top guys like Diego Lima aren't leaving, or the Pitbull brothers, they're not leaving, but they just got Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler was a Bellator staple for 5-6 years, if not longer.
So in 2019, 37% of UFC fighters earned less than $45,000 a year.
Yeah.
37%.
So that's like, you could even reduce your pool of fighters and pay less people more money, and then use these other organizations as almost like a proxy farm league for you, which I know they kind of do anyway.
Or even if you doubled the salary in the UFC of the fighters, you would still be paying less than 40% of your net profit for the year.
Yes.
I mean,
and that's across the board. They could double everybody's salary. So instead of the 5 and 5, people are starting out in 10 and 10.
And then you have the people, and that includes even at the people at the top of the UFC.
Yeah, instead of people making 250 per fight, they're making 500.
Instead of the best fighters in the UFC struggling to make 10, now it's like, oh, Conor's making 20 a fight? That draws more attention to it.
Yeah.
When you have fighters getting paid more, it draws more eyes and gets more people talking about it.
Yeah, if Conor's making, because he probably makes like a couple, like $2 million per fight now or something like that, $2 or $3 million. I don't know if those numbers are accurate. I'm just thinking of like
when Brock Lesnar made his return, they said something like $10 million for his compensation.
Yeah, well, that's
I know, and that's the highest end. Exactly.
Yeah.
But like, and that got people talking about it. But now if we're talking like UFC fighters on the regular touting numbers like 10 million per fight, that's a big deal, and that really elevates the sport and gets more people interested in like, oh shit, you can make that much money in the UFC.
Yeah. It just, there's this goes back to my original argument that I don't think saying that Bellator, or not mentioning Bellator's name on your broadcast, I don't think that helps the UFC in any way. I really don't. I don't think it hurt. I don't think it hurts them necessarily either, but when it's really obvious and like it's not going to do any harm to you, why not just mention it? I don't think it's a problem.
I wholeheartedly agree.
All right, guys, that's it for today. If you made it this far, you're awesome. Make sure you like and subscribe. You go back. You look through our back catalog. Like if you want to see recaps of other fights or previews and make fun of me, go and comment in there. Like how I was wrong about Conor McGregor. You can talk crap about
how I was wrong about almost every other fight prediction I've ever made.
Yeah, like you can just talk crap about like our 50-50 predictions. Like who cares? You can go and do that.
30-60. Let's be honest.
I said 70-30 for this one. This was bad. But yeah, like and subscribe. If you just listen to this on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, there is a video up. So you want to you want to see our faces or throw this on in the background while you're at work or something, you're more than welcome to do that on YouTube. And then also vice versa. If you watch this on YouTube and going forward, you'd like to just listen to it in the car or wherever, we're on Spotify and wherever else you get your podcast. So
take care out there, all you crazy people.
Yeah, I know. Hope everybody has an awesome day. Later, everybody.